In The Bold and the Beautiful, legacy has always been both a crown and a burden, and no one carries that weight more visibly than Eric Forester. As the patriarch of a fashion empire built on vision, discipline, and sacrifice, Eric has spent a lifetime balancing art with responsibility, family with ambition. Yet in this chapter of the story, the pressure no longer comes from competitors or market forces, but from the people closest to him. Ridge and Brooke's relentless criticism of his decision to work with Katie does not merely challenge his authority, it questions his relevance, his judgment, and his right to define the final act of his own career. The atmosphere at Forester Creations becomes increasingly volatile as these disagreements escalate. Ridge Forester, driven by a conviction that he knows what is best for the company and for his father, confronts Eric with a mixture of frustration and fear. To Ridge, Eric's choice feels reckless, a refusal to accept the natural order of succession. Brooke Logan, equally vocal, frames her objections as concern, but beneath her arguments lies an anxiety about stability, about what Eric's defiance could cost the family brand she has spent decades protecting. Their words, though rooted in care, land as accusations, eroding Eric's sense of autonomy piece by piece. Each argument chips away at Eric's resolve, pushing him toward a breaking point he refuses to acknowledge. He listens, nods, and responds with measured calm, but the tension coils tightly beneath the surface. What Ridge and Brooke do not see, or perhaps refuse to see, is that Eric's decision to work for Katie Logan is not a whim or a provocation. It is a declaration of identity. For Eric, creating this first collection for the Logan house is proof that his creativity still burns, that his hands and mind have not been dulled by age or sidelined by legacy. It is his way of asserting that retirement should be a choice, not a sentence imposed by others. As the confrontations intensify, Eric begins to conceal the most dangerous truth of all. His health is failing. What starts as fatigue becomes breathlessness. What feels like stress evolves into pain he quietly endures. He tells himself it is temporary, manageable, something he can push through once the collection is complete. Each sketch, each late night in the studio becomes an act of defiance, not just against Ridge and Brooke, but against his own body. The collection is no longer just work. It is a mission fueled by pride and fear, by the need to leave something unmistakably his before the world decides he is finished. Forester Creations becomes a battleground where creativity and conflict collide. Meetings with Ridge and Brooke grow sharper, voices raised, accusations barely restrained. The air feels heavy, charged with years of unresolved tension between father and son, between loyalty and independence. Eric absorbs it all, determined to remain standing, determined not to show weakness. But the strain accumulates relentlessly, invisible yet devastating, like pressure building beneath a fault line. The breaking point arrives without warning. In the midst of a particularly heated meeting, one that spirals from business strategy into deeply personal territory, Eric's strength finally gives way. The room falls silent as he collapses, the arguments evaporating into shock and terror. In that moment, power dynamics dissolve. Titles, grudges, and philosophies become meaningless as panic takes over. Eric is rushed to the hospital, the weight of the past hours crashing down on everyone left behind. The hospital corridors fill with familiar faces as the Forester and Logan families gather. United by fear, the waiting room becomes a space suspended in time, where whispered regrets and unspoken prayers hang in the air. Ridge paces, replaying his words over and over, wondering which ones might have pushed his father too far. Brooke sits frozen, her certainty shattered, confronted with the possibility that her insistence on caution may have cost them everything. When the doctors finally speak, their words cut through the room with brutal clarity. Eric has suffered a severe heart attack. Emergency surgery is necessary. The prognosis is uncertain. The news lands like a physical blow, stripping away denial and replacing it with raw, collective grief. The family is forced to confront a truth they have long avoided. Eric is not indestructible, and their conflicts have consequences that extend far beyond pride or principle. As Eric lies in a coma, the silence around his bed becomes heavy with unfinished conversations. It is here that Donna Logan steps forward, her voice trembling as she reveals what she has witnessed in private. She speaks of Eric's exhaustion, of nights spent working through pain, of the quiet determination that masked his declining health. She reveals the toll Ridge's pressure to retire took on him, the way it cut deeper than any professional setback ever could. Donna's confession reframes the narrative, transforming Eric's defiance into an act of survival rather than stubbornness. Ridge is forced to face the unintended cruelty of his certainty. The realization that his push for control may have accelerated his father's collapse leaves him shaken, stripped of defensiveness. Brooke, too, is confronted with her role. recognizing that her focus on stability blinded her to Eric's need for dignity. In the shadow of the hospital room, blame gives way to remorse, and remorse to a fragile unity forged by fear. At Eric's bedside, old divisions soften. Katie, Logan, and Brooke find themselves standing together, bound not by rivalry or resentment but by love for the man who brought their worlds together. In quiet conversation, they acknowledge the cost of competition and the necessity of compassion. Family, they realize, is not defined by agreements or alliances, but by the willingness to set differences aside when it matters most. As machines hum softly and doctors move with practiced urgency, the family waits, united by hope and regret. Eric's condition forces each of them to reevaluate what they value, what they fight for, and what they are willing to risk. The crisis does not erase the past, but it reshapes its meaning, reminding them that legacy is not only built through success, but preserved through empathy. This storyline stands as one of the most emotionally resonant arcs in The Bold and the Beautiful. Not because of spectacle, but because of its intimacy. It explores how pressure masquerades as concern, how love can wound when filtered through control, and how easily time is taken for granted until it threatens to run out. As Eric fights for his life, those around him are forced to confront a sobering truth. The most important battles are not won in boardrooms or design studios, but in moments of humility, forgiveness, and unity when everything else falls away. In The Bold and the Beautiful, some endings are written not to shock, but to silence every argument that once felt impossible to stop. Eric Forester's death does not arrive with theatrical cruelty or sudden violence. It comes quietly, devastatingly, in the early hours after surgery, when hope has been stretched so thin that no one dares breathe too deeply. A single flat tone from a monitor replaces decades of voice, authority, and presence. In that moment, the war between Logan and Forester ends, not because it is resolved, but because it is rendered meaningless. The hospital room becomes a still point in a world that has been spinning on conflict for generations. Doctors speak in measured, respectful tones, but their words barely register. What fills the space instead is absence. Eric is no longer a patient fighting to recover. He is a memory crystallizing before his family's eyes. Ridge Forester stands frozen, staring at the man who defined his life more than any title ever could. For the first time, Ridge is not a designer, a CEO, or a son fighting for control. He is simply a child who waited too long to stop arguing and start listening. The grief that follows is not explosive, it is suffocating. Brooke Logan feels it settle into her chest like a weight she cannot dislodge. Her mind replays every conversation, every moment where practicality drowned out compassion. She remembers standing firm, believing she was protecting the future, never imagining that the present was slipping away so fast. In Eric's death, Brooke is forced to confront the cost of being right when kindness might have mattered more. The news spreads quickly, but the impact ripples unevenly. At Forester Creations, the halls fall silent. Sketches remain pinned to boards, fabrics draped over mannequins like unfinished thoughts. Eric's final collection for the Logan house, still incomplete, becomes a sacred artifact rather than a business venture. No one touches it, no one dares decide its fate. The company that once thrived on competition and ambition now moves cautiously, as though any loud decision might dishonor the man who built it. At the funeral, the divisions between the Logans and the Foresters finally dissolve. Not through speeches or reconciliations, but through shared grief. They sit side by side, no longer separated by legacy or resentment, but united by the enormity of what has been lost. Katie Logan watches Ridge from across the aisle and sees not an adversary, but a man broken by regret. Brooke meets Katie's eyes, and in that silent exchange, years of rivalry collapse into understanding. Eric's death has stripped them of the illusion that there was ever a winner in their conflict. When Donna Logan steps forward to speak, her words do not recount achievements or milestones. She speaks of Eric as a man who worked until his body failed him. Not out of pride alone, but out of fear of being erased, replaced, remembered only as a name on a building. She speaks of the quiet moments, the exhaustion he tried to hide, the determination to finish one last collection not to prove others wrong, but to prove himself still alive. Her voice breaks as she admits that he died believing love and creativity were still worth fighting for, even when they hurt him. Ridge's reckoning begins at the graveside. The earth settling over Eric's coffin feels final in a way no argument ever was. He realizes that every battle he fought to protect the company was built on the assumption that there would always be time to make peace later. Eric's death shatters that assumption. Ridge understands now that legacy is not preserved through control but through trust. The realization is brutal, irreversible, and transformative. In the days that follow, Ridge makes a decision that surprises everyone, including himself. He halts all hostilities between the houses, publicly and privately. He acknowledges that the war with the Logans cost Eric his peace, if not his life. There is no dramatic apology, no grand gesture. Instead, there is a quiet, resolute shift. Ridge refuses to let Eric's final chapter be remembered as one written in conflict. He chooses cooperation not as strategy, but as penance. Brooke, too, changes. She withdraws from power struggles she once believed essential. Standing in Eric's empty office, she feels the futility of dominance. She understands now that Eric did not need protection from risk, he needed permission to matter. Brooke becomes an advocate for unity. Not because it is easy, but because division feels unbearable in Eric's absence. The final act of Eric's influence comes through his unfinished work. The family gathers to decide its fate, tension thick but restrained. It is Katie Logan who proposes the solution that ends the war definitively. The collection will be released jointly, credited to Eric alone, with proceeds dedicated to a foundation in his name. One that supports young designers denied opportunity by age, illness, or exclusion. The proposal lands with quiet force. No one argues. To do so would feel like defying Eric himself. When the collection finally debuts, it is not framed as a triumph, but as a farewell. Models walk slowly, solemnly, fabrics moving like echoes of the man who created them. The audience does not applaud at first. Many are crying. The press calls it historic. But those who know the truth understand it is something rarer. An ending that refuses to be exploited. Eric's death does not erase the past, but it reframes it. The Logan Forester War ends not with victory or defeat, but with mourning. Old wounds remain, but they no longer bleed. The family learns, too late but not entirely in vain, that love withheld becomes regret, and that power pursued without empathy leaves nothing worth inheriting. In the final quiet moments of this arc, Ridge stands alone in the design studio. Lights low, Eric's sketches spread across the table. He does not touch them. He simply looks, understanding now that everything he ever fought for existed because Eric once chose creation over control. The war is over because its reason died with the man who held them all together. And in that silence, the legacy Eric Forester leaves behind is not a company, not a fortune, but a hard-earned truth that finally unites them all. Family is not something you win. It is something you protect before it